So today we're going to talk about how Tantra is not hedonism. When I first began teaching Tantra, I lived in a small town. I had children in town. I taught yoga, meditation. I was sort of, I guess my ego was a spiritual teacher or whatever. And the idea of coming out as a Tantra teacher, coming out was quite scary because I thought, oh my God, everyone's going to think I'm just doing orgies every weekend, or you hear about all these crazy things about Tantra and what they do. And then I remember going to Toronto and there was this workshop happening and I was really excited to find other Tantra communities. And it was sort of like this Tantra talk. Was it hair pulling and spanking done right or something like that? And I was like, what? Because that wasn't the Tantra I was studying. It wasn't the Tantra I was experiencing, and I didn't understand it. So I started going deeper into what is this idea around the idea that Tantra means that you need to be open to everything. And this was something I also encountered when I went to retreats sometimes. They'd be like, oh, here's what we're going to do. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Well, you have to be open to this. That's what it is to be Tantric. And again, I went deeper into it, saying, where did this come from? Where did this idea come from? And one of the places it came from is one of the teachings in Tantra is to be open to everything. But it doesn't mean being open to everything in the world. It means being open to whatever is next on your path. Right? Tantra is a journey of transformation. It's taking us from this place and truly becoming all that we really are. And the number one thing that blocks us from becoming all that we truly are our belief systems, structures of society, whatever it is around us that actually isn't human. We've internalized a lot of things about the world. It could simply just begin with our own karma and past experiences and stuff coming in. We don't come in as a blank slate, Then we're born into a family who has ideas about things. They have ways of communicating, what relationships are all about. Do you trust people? Can you be open? These are all things we learn in such a formative time. We're not even conscious we're learning them. So they become now structures in our minds, parts of our belief systems that we don't even know are there. It's interesting. Lately, I've been really conscious of my belief systems and, all of a sudden different lights are being shone on them. And sometimes I feel like I'm going home, visiting my parents' house that I grew up in, and looking up on the walls of the living room and seeing a clock and saying, when did that clock get there? And they say, this is all made up. And then they say, well, it's always been there. And I'm like, really? I've never noticed it before. This is a lot like our belief systems. They've just always been there. We have no idea. If someone actually said, do you believe this? Do you believe that? We'd say, oh, well, we don't even know it's there. These are the things that block our transformation because they create the box that we're meant to live in, and not meant to just to live in. This is the definition of success. This is the definition of expansion. Here's what I remember when I was married, I married a farmer, and in their family, life was about suffering and working hard. It was a lot from their history in the family and generations. So the only way of expansion was suffering and working harder. So we worked 16, 17 hours a day, and that was our entire life. And this was expansion. This was the ideal life, right? So it's interesting how this sort of gets locked in. So the Tantrikas say, we need to be open if we want to expand into who we truly are. We're not expanding into something we're not. It's and I think that's one of the challenges in the spiritual journey. We think that we have to become this exalted something that's beyond our understanding. But the truth is who we really, really are. It's actually our happiest, most relaxed, self. And it's almost like as soon as you relax, you feel every part of yourself expand, right? As soon as we're tense, we constrict. Well, all the rules make us tense, right? When we release the rules, everything relaxes. This is where it's like an acorn, right? Within an acorn, I'm assuming everybody, this is my assumption that everybody has oak trees where you live, but an acorn is the seed of an oak tree, which is one of the biggest trees in Canada. And it has this beautiful, majestic presence that it just the mighty oak, right? And of course, the metaphor is that it comes from this tiny acorn. But within the acorn, the only thing that can grow out of an acorn is an oak tree. Unless you put a box around it. And it may still grow into some kind of oak tree, but it won't be that majestic oak tree. And all we have to do is get out of the way. We have to remove the rocks, remove whatever it is that's impinging the growth, and it will grow into the mighty oak. We just have to leave it be. And at its foundation, that's what Tantra is. It doesn't require ritual. It doesn't require all these things. It's really just whatever it takes to just really be able to be you. So the Tantrics, they were known as being system busters, which is also, I think, where a lot of the hedonism ideas come from, because there would be stories about the Tantrics and the Tantricas rolling into town. And if the town was particularly governed by chastity and sex was taboo, which, is the society we were raised in, right? You can't talk about it. It's bad. It's, only good if it's within a marriage, all that stuff. So basically the Tantrics would look at that and they would see how limiting that was, especially sexually. And I think this is, again, where the Tantra gets very confused sexually, because when we have this beautiful, open perspective on life and we bring that into our intimacy, sex becomes what it's designed for. It becomes this amazing experience. Someone once said to me, they said, not everyone can experience God during sex, Katrina. But I think we can. I think that's the point. I think the merging of two people allows for an expansion beyond many, many things. But because of the taboo nature that we've placed upon sex, it all gets twisted. So the application of Tantra in sex is 100% there. The application of being open to anything in intimacy is there. But it's really about being open within. It's being open. Sorry, I'm tangenting all over the place, but that's okay. It's being open to what you're called to. Tantra is a spiritual journey. It's a journey of connecting our divine self with our physical self, always. And it's a bit of a bad habit in our world today, in our secular world, to delete God out of a spiritual journey. Tantra's never been a physical path. It's always been a spiritual path. That's what makes us expansive, because we're connecting to something infinite and then bringing that infinite aspect into this beautiful physical world, right? It adds wonder, and it's almost like in the world we think, well, I can choose this or this. These are my options. That's duality. That's sort of the idea. It's yes or no. Those are the only other options. When we take a tantric approach, or a really broad spiritual approach, we sit quietly with the question and we ask, what is my next step on this path? And it's one of many. It isn't one or the other. There's 1,000 choices, but there'll be one for you. This is the courage. This is stepping into this. In intimacy, just think of that. Like, think of the structures we've imposed on intimacy. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it should be. Here's what I have to accomplish. Here's what I desire. Here's what I want. Here's what I want the other person to look like, act like. Like, the structures in intimacy are strangely profuse. They are strangely huge in an act that's supposed to just be fun and joyful and pleasurable and lighthearted. And maybe it comes from all that taboo. Maybe it comes from that structure. Maybe it comes from something else. Maybe it's because, we're not supposed to be having it, which is a funny thing to say in 2021, but those whispers still exist within us, right? That you're not supposed to enjoy this. You're not supposed to be free in this. You're not supposed to love it. You're not supposed to want it. And that creates a twist inside of us. And I think the beautiful thing about Tantra is it straightens that road, right? No matter what structures we're coming out of, no matter what we've believed, no matter what experiences we've had in our life that have created rules and created fears and created hopes that we want to accomplish. Tantra says, just sit quietly and listen. Just connect with you. Hear the answer, and then have the courage to walk forward and take that step. Even if that step you've never seen anyone do before. Maybe you've never had anyone in your life take that journey. But more importantly, you've never taken that step. What's interesting is Tantra gets applied to the sexual world and says we need to be open to everything. But even within that, it's actually our own fear that we have to be open to stepping through, right? It's actually opening ourselves to vulnerability. It's opening ourselves to trying something different. Like, we are incredible creatures of habit, right? It could be even voicing our thoughts, right? It could be even saying, I would love if we did this, which is a huge deal. It's a huge deal to be able to actually say, what would you think of that, right? It's easy to say when we say it quickly, but it's actually a really big deal. I'm going to just stop there. It's an interesting thing to actually live with no constructs. Like, can you imagine never saying, here's what I am, here's what I do, here's what I believe, and living in this perpetual place of anything goes, but anything goes for you, not anything goes. Right? I'll answer Eric's question. Could someone asking for something put the person being asked in a box? That's an excellent question. So also part of the premise of listening within it asks all of us to connect that way. So imagine you have two people who are first connecting vertically within their own self. So as we interact with each other, we are truly connecting this way through the heart, through our emotions, but we're primarily connecting this way. This is our primary guidance system. So if someone says to me, Katrina, could we try this? I check in with me here and I go, I'm not quite feeling that right now. That's interesting. Or, oh, well, that's an interesting exploration. But it isn't personal, right? It's not me rejecting that person's idea on a personal level. It's me listening here and saying, I don't feel it right now, but can we kind of table it maybe, right? It's a very different experience when two people come together who are both listening, we don't take things as personally, because we always have choice. We trust that the other person is listening within, right? We're not just reacting. I once knew a man, the things that I talk about in total public, I once knew a man who really wanted to be lovers. And for whatever reason, I didn't feel called to be his lover. It wasn't right. And later, many years later, he really wanted to develop his intuition. He really wanted to feel that divine connection. And one weekend, we were away at a gathering or something, and we were staying together because we were friends, And I could still feel sort of this angst inside of him that said, "Oh, how come we're not lovers? How come we're not this?" And the funny thing is, I had this sort of call inside of me, so when I hear guidance, or when I trust this in what I say. I trust that whatever I'm supposed to say will come out. I'm going to hear it. And if I don't say it, it's going to repeat itself over and over and over again until I say it. So this weekend, we're sitting in this hotel room just chatting, and all of a sudden, this voice starts coming through my head. You have to say this, you have to say this, you have to say this. And I'm arguing with the voice saying, I'm not going to say that. So I said it. And what I said was, tell you what, we can go to the retreat if you want. I said, but I want you to sit quietly. I want you to pray. I want you to ask for guidance. And I want you to ask, are we meant to stay in this hotel and make love all weekend? Or are we meant to go to the retreat? And he looked at me like, are you kidding? And I said, I want you to listen and trust. And whatever the answer is, I'm happy to play. So he closed his eyes and he asked the question, and he opened his eyes and he looked at me and he said, the answer is no. We're supposed to go to the retreat. and I said, I assumed that, but I wasn't sure. And that's, I think, the difference. There becomes a lightheartedness about it that says it isn't personal. It's just what is in the moment. But it's so good to talk about it. And thank you for asking the question, because someone recently, we were talking about trust. And because a lot of people ask me that in Tantra, they say, but how do I trust the person again? I've been hurt before. How do I trust this other person? So there's a lot of different kinds of Tantra. They talk about white Tantra, red Tantra, black Tantra, White Tantra, it's kind of a conversation for another day, but it's not that complicated. But white Tantra is the primary directive is to simply connect with God. So the pure white Tantra is you sit and you stare at yantras, the beautiful, they're not mandalas, but they're pictures that have a very particular point. And when you stare at them, the idea is that it alters your brain, it alters your mind so that you can actually connect with God. Or they chant mantras, or they do whatever it is in your life that helps you connect with God, right? This expansive, ethereal something that we can't explain. The reason we do that is it connects us with a different reality. It connects us outside of this physical world. It connects us with this infinite aspect of who we are. When we have that connection, that's what we trust. There is so much security in that. So all of a sudden, imagine I come into a relationship and I have this incredible backdrop of faith or trust or confidence that I'm on a journey and I'm here to have an experience. And I wonder what this will be about. And then this person comes to me, and maybe it's a partner or a lover or a friend or even an experience like this, speaking with you guys today, right? I come to it with an idea that says, I wonder what will happen. I wonder how this will be. But my faith is in my own connection, and then we interact. So then how much do I have to trust the other person? Right? How much does that matter? All I need to do is trust my guidance. And if I feel called to share, then I share. If I feel called to ask a question, I ask a question. If I feel called to, even sexually, like that's literally how I make love, right? It's just whatever comes, I just do it. And however it works, it works. Normally, normally I'm as surprised as the other person. We all get to go on the journey together. And it's really beautiful. It changes everything. Because you don't have to do anything for me. You don't have to meet my need. I remember reading, I think it was a David Data book I read a long time ago called Tantra Quest or something. And his teacher in that book, he used to talk about him and his wife and how both he and his wife were married to the Great One independently. They were each married to the Great One, that they didn't have to make each other happy because they were each married this way. And then they chose to be together. And that really struck me. So when we talk about hedonism versus Tantra, Tantra is not the journey of pleasure. It turns out to be incredibly pleasurable, kind of in ways that we can't imagine because it's so far outside the box that we were raised in, or even the box that most people around us are living in. But the journey, the courage needed for that transformation isn't always pleasurable. In fact, it often isn't. For me, one of the big differences is the difference between growth versus transformation. When we simply grow, it's like we grow within our own comfort zone. Years ago, I studied psychology at university. That was a later degree, and they were talking about myelination of the brain and how the brain starts as gray matter. And every time we actually learn something, a white myelin sheath is formed over the gray matter, and we now have white matter. So this professor is talking, it was like Psych 101 or something, and they were talking about how most myelination ends around the age 19. And I thought, that doesn't make any sense. I wonder why. And I did a lot of research into it, and my sense right now, I mean, I didn't go all the way through it, but is that in many ways we do stop actually expanding and growing. You know, we maybe leave high school, and let's say we're really good at English, we're really good at math, we're really good at athletics, we're really good at health, or we're really good at economics. We tend to grow within the stream we're comfortable in, right? We grow within the place that we already have some giftings. This is not transformation. This is growth. And growth is good, but it isn't transformation, and it doesn't create myelination in the brain. Albert Einstein, when he died, his brain was one of the most heavily myelinated brains they'd ever seen. And you know, between your left and your right brain, you have the corpus callosum, which is how the left and right brains speak to each other. And his brain, his corpus callosum, was pure white matter because he was always learning, and not learning within what he knew, learning beyond what he knew, spending time pondering infinity, pondering God space, pondering beyond mathematics and science. And then he would bring those ponderings back in, and he would change what he believed, and he would create a new idea. This is transformation. This is Tantra. This is that ability to look beyond what we were taught and imagine something different, right? This is not growth. This is caterpillar to butterfly. This is, here's what I once was, and I don't even recognize that woman anymore. That's transformation. Well, I'm sure if you've ever gone through a transformation, there is that period in the chrysalis, and I apologize for the well-used metaphor, but where it's really hard. It's a very difficult time. It's a hard thing to make a new choice that we've never made before. And this is where this connection to God, this is where this tantric connection within is so powerful. Because as soon as we have that connection, and the next choice arrives, and we look at it, and it's not going to be some ethereal divine calling. It's going to be something like, I need to speak my truth in a relationship I've never spoken my truth in before. I need to live in a way I've never lived before, and yet it's always called to me. Those are the transformational tidbits, because all we're trying to do is grow into the oak tree that we really are. But somehow, some structure came in, some belief came in and said, you can't do that. But isn't that weird? Isn't it weird that we can't do those things? You know, if you were to close your eyes right now and ask a question, whatever the question is that's current in your life right now, and the answer said, do this thing, and you say, I can't do that. Why? Why can't we do that thing? And that's the journey. And that's when we go into meditation, or we do whatever it is that allows us to connect with that infinite aspect of who we are. For some of us, it might be walking in the woods, right? Whatever it is that shuts the brain down. So many years ago, just over 20 years ago, I was sick. I had lumps growing in my breasts. My mom had just died of breast cancer. Her mama died of breast cancer. And I was married, small children, my life ahead of me. I was 29 years old. And I was really afraid because everyone in my family had died of cancer. And now, here I was, walking in this path again. And this is when my first teacher appeared, who I talk about in the book that's mentioned in the comments. And one of the things he said to me in that time was, you have to learn to shut off your mind. Well, for me, my mind was, I believed, all I had. At that point, I had really crappy self-esteem. I had a degree, I have a mathematics degree. So to me, my brain was all I had. That was, without that, who was I? And I used to look at him and say, it's like you're asking a runner to cut off his legs, to cut off my brain, what's left of me. And he said, well, of course he goes, well, you don't have to do it. You can die if you want. I mean, you'll come back. Don't worry about it. He was the most interesting teacher because he had absolutely no attachment to this world. And just as a side, he had been electrocuted in 1987. He was carrying an extension ladder and he hit an overhead wire and it kind of zapped him and he basically died. And when he came back, he remembered all of his lifetimes. So he had this amazing unattachment to this lifetime. And he dove into it. Like, it's not that he dove into this world. He loved life. His biggest confusion about humans was why we don't walk around fully orgasmic all the time. Why do we walk around so stressed out all the time when we could choose an orgasmic state? And of course, I'm like 29 years old and my husband's 30 and we're sitting there just listening to him like, I have no idea what you're talking about, But this was him. So whether I chose to cut off my brain or not, he was like, yeah, whatever. Do it, don't do it. It doesn't matter. You'll figure it out one way or the other. But they say, there's no atheists in a foxhole. As the lumps changed and things got more painful and things, I was starting to become more willing to shut my brain off. But of course, I was replacing it with something else. I was replacing it with faith, however you understand that, or with this inner connection. And I was moving my dependency from my brain to that. And I know this is loaded spiritual stuff, but to this connection. And that's what I was shifting it to. And this is the real blessing of Tantra, because all of those belief systems, all the structures that limit us are stored in here. They're stored in this place that says, now, that's not okay. That's not righteous. That's not successful. What will people think? But I often, sometimes whenever those thoughts go through my mind, I kind of imagine myself, like let's say I lived till I was 105 or something. And someone said to me, what's your secret? I'm pretty sure my secret wouldn't have been listening to my brain and doing all the right things. One of my favorite, I saw a woman interviewed once, I don't know, she was like in her hundreds, and it was this great picture, or it was just a meme on Facebook, I have no idea. And they said, what's your secret? And she said, chocolate and having sex with young men. Or something. She instantly became my hero. I was like, now that's a way to live 101 years. But that's the blessing, right? To actually have the faith within, and however you understand God, however you understand a spiritual journey, however you understand this connection, we can imagine it as being connected to our non-physical self, or our deepest self, our highest self, or our wisest self. Sometimes I think of that. I think there's an aspect of me that knows, right? It knows the truth. Then there's my physical self that gets all caught up in what other people think, right? To actually live my wisest self, right? Which is probably much quirkier than the person I'm trying to live to make other people happy. One of the things I love about the mystics and the gurus is the ones that I'm most attracted to learning from are the ones that are totally free. They're not the ones that sit there and say, here's the yoga postures you must do every day. Here are the rules. It's like they're just putting a new structure on what you need to do, right? The mystics that blow my mind, which is probably why I'm so why Tantra is such an integral part of how I understand the world, is they'd be sitting there, just happy as anything, just totally peaceful in that Buddha nature we imagine things, our ideal spiritual life, totally Buddha, totally calm. And then something would happen that pissed them off, and they fly off the handle, and they just freak out, and they just go running down the street going, everybody, or something crazy. And some part of our training says that that's not spiritual, right? That person must be off balance, or they're caught up in the world, or they've been triggered. Right? That's a famous, oh my gosh, this must have triggered you. It must be something inside of you. Or it's not. What if it's just being real in the moment? Imagine just being real right here all the time, no matter what comes. I'm just going to share whatever is my reality right now. Imagine how free that is to just be here right now all the time. It's really beautiful. We have 20 minutes left, and I'm going to keep talking. But if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. One of the great challenges of shutting the brain off and really living in this open way that says, I'm open to everything. I'm open to whatever the next step on my path is the belief that if we didn't have our brains, if we didn't have rules, we would somehow go wild. We would go sideways. We would do wrong things. We would do bad things. It's sort of that training that says we're sinful by nature, right? So we need a construct. We need somebody to tell us what to do, because if left to our own devices, bad things are going to happen. And this is a personal question. This is a deep philosophical question that we each have to ask ourselves. Do I believe that at a soul level, if set free, I would do good things or bad things? I mean, it's a philosophical question whether those constructs exist also, but what is it? And it's an important question to ask, because if you believe that you are intrinsically good, whatever that means to you, then we're always free to speak. We're always free to do. But if for whatever reason we believe that we're intrinsically destructive, the irony is, even if we believe that, we're still going to do it anyway. It's funny how we think that these constructs and controls actually control us, but they don't. Our soul always does what it desires anyway. I feel like it's better to try to calm my emotions at work, but it would be freeing, that's for sure. I feel like we're in a transition. Emotions and feelings are something that have had to been buried for a long time. Even within a family home, emotions and feelings aren't allowed, right? How imagine a child who's upset about something and they're sent to their room. Just go to your room until you're feeling better. There's a lot of constructs we're living within right now that say, don't feel anything. Don't share emotions. Don't share your truth. But we know better, right? We know that this is actually our truth. A couple of years ago, I gave everything away. In 2018, my kids are in their 20s. I was divorced. My whole business is online. And so I gave all my belongings away and I began traveling. And I just was following the call wherever I went. And at one point I ended up in Greece. And I was chatting with a young man. And it was so interesting because he was speaking, with a very, very thick accent. So what I share is a probably simplified version of what he really meant. But what he basically said was he believed that human beings were made of two things, mathematics and emotions. And he said he believed that emotions were how we actually communicated. And this was very interesting to me, to actually imagine a world where we actually allowed our emotions, our hearts to open, and this is how we communicated with each other. Just truth, happy, sad, elated, frustrated. But we all have this beautiful alignment, so we don't have to fix anybody. We're not obligated to do anything. Feeling someone else's emotions doesn't alter my reality. That's just their truth, right? So the world where we are free to completely share our emotions and communicate that way, it's almost a different foundation. It's like we can begin to hone it with certain friendships or certain relationships. But out in the big world or at work, it's a funny misfit, right? It's a funny misfit to share that emotional truth in a world that has no place to put it. So I hear you. It's a challenge to, we tend to just sort of stifle our emotions in places like work where There's just no places for them to go. Whereas I remember years ago when I was married, we were farmers, and I used to have a lot of people come to the farm for counseling and things like that. And my husband would come walking in from the barn, and someone would be coming out of the house, and they'd be crying, and they'd be getting into their car, and he'd be coming in for coffee or something, knowing that they were leaving. And he'd come into the house, and he'd say, "So that was a good session, huh?" And he'd always judge whether it was a good session, whether people were crying or not. Because it meant we actually shared. We actually were open. We got underneath the mental constructs that said we weren't allowed to share our feelings. We weren't allowed to get to our truth. So I have great respect for feelings and emotions, and bit by bit, we'll create a world where that's allowed. And when you refer to Tantra, is it the same thing as Tibetan Buddhist Tantra? So the answer is yes and no. Tantra is it's a Sanskrit word that means many things. One of the challenges of using Sanskrit words is that each word has like 100 different meanings depending on its context. So Tantra, in some context, it means a loom, that which weaves together. In another context, Tantra means tools of transformation. Tantra, the concept of Tantra, was adopted by almost all of the religions of the East. So there's Taoist Tantra, Buddhist Tantra, Hindu Tantra, Shivaite Tantra. There's all these different things, but this is probably an oversimplification, but it's like in English, if we were to say the word tools of change, you might go into the Christian world and say, I would use these tools of change. And I might go into a Native American and say, here's what we do as a tool of change. It's sort of all these different ways, but it's a word that means tools of change. What I do find within all the different tantras, within the Buddhist line, within the Hindu line, within the Shivite, within all these different lines, is they all come back to the same source. They all come back to this place of saying, what is it that helps us achieve full divine and physical integration? And of course, in the Buddhist Tantra, it's a different thing because it's a non-theistic belief system. And if I was to say, my perception of Buddhism, which is, I'm not a Buddhist and I'm not a well-learned Buddhist, so this is 100% Buddhism according to Katrina. My perception of Zen, my perception of that nothingness, that lack, is also pure potential. It is the creative aspect of the world. And the idea of completely releasing all the constructs to access Zen, to access that deep quiet, that deep emptiness. It's not empty. It's pure potential. There's a language problem. When I first discovered Tantra, I actually came to it because I knew that more was possible in intimacy. And not just sexual intimacy, but more was possible between humans. And especially loving humans, especially intimate lovers, partners, spouses. It was almost like I knew there was more possible as a human. And I remember lying in bed one night If any of you guys have read my book, you've heard this story. And the word Tantra came to me. I didn't even know what it was. This was before Google, before the internet was widespread. And I couldn't even Google it. And all I knew was there was this word Tantra that I had to learn about. And I went to the local library, and I mean a small town. I was living in the town I was on the farm still, but I actually went to the library in the town I'm living right now, which has 8,000 people in it. Very small, conservative town. And I asked the little old ladies, I said, could you order in some books for me on Tantra? Well, all the books that they ordered in, all these books, and of course they're all about, sexual rituals under the moon and covering yourself with mud and having sex with 12 people and all this stuff. Right? So they're like staring at me like they're stamping the book. This is how long ago it was. They're stamping the book right as they're putting it out to me, giving it to me. And as I was reading, it's like I was reading, looking for what I was looking for. Like I was looking for what I knew in my heart, but I didn't even know I knew it yet. And I would read these books and go, that's not the Tantra I'm looking for. And then I would look at this one, and that's not the Tantra I'm looking for. And it was so interesting that I knew what I was looking for before I opened the book, and yet I had no idea. And I really feel a lot of that is the Tantric path. That is the point, that every single one of us that's here today, there's something we're looking for. There's something that is the key to open us up, that opens us into our full self, our full potential. And I don't even like that word potential, but our full oak tree, right? And it's almost like we look through books, we listen to talks, we listen to whatever, we walk in the woods, we listen, but we're listening for something that we already know is there. And so it's always an interesting question. I'm really thankful you asked about the different kinds of Tantra, because it's like there was ever only one kind of Tantra I was seeking. And because for whatever my calling is in the world, it seems to be about connection and love and relationships. And it's not just intimate, it's even with my children or with parents and the communities and everything. There's something about that. So the only applications of Tantra that seem to spark with me are things that empower us and empower us to actually connect deeper with each other. So it's always interesting whenever I've tried to study other lineages of Tantra, and it just goes, like it just goes by me. And I go, it's not what I'm looking for. So we have a few minutes left here. Oh, great. We look for verification of what we already know. It's interesting. Somebody called me out on that. I was writing for Medium, and someone said something, and they said, "Oh, well, that's what we do. We go around and we just look for the things that agree with us." But he said it in a negative way, in a sort of a way of how we get more deeper entrenched in our belief systems, which I guess is sort of true sometimes. But there is that thing when we know deep inside, that's what we're seeking, and we're looking for. It's like we know it inside, almost energetically. That's not the right word, but so we're seeking the manifestation of it out in the world. We're seeking it out in the world that makes it real. And I think that's really valuable. Intuition. Yeah, we have 3 minutes. Intuition to me is the foundation of Tantric guidance. It's just spiritual guidance. It's sort of the idea that when we look at the chakra systems and we understand that the lower chakras are a connection into the earth. The first chakra is how we fit into community. Second chakra is how we relate to each other. Third chakra is who I am. So that's sort of who I am in the physical world. There's many, many topics about chakras we can look at. There's just one aspect. And then up here, here's our connection to source, to infinity. Here's how we hear that information. And here's how we share it. And this is the upper triangle, they call it. And then the heart center, in the center, anahat. It's anahat, unstruck chord. It's how we hear the intuition, and then we manifest it into the world. Then we go out into the world, and we experience the world, and we ask questions. And isn't that interesting? And it rises back up through anahat, and it asks the question, and we get an answer, and then we intuit the answer, and we bring it back down into the world. It's a beautiful way of, it's that full human experience, the full divine physical experience. And intuition to me it's a piece that we've lost, but is very, very natural. It's almost integral to being human, is to actually hear this guidance, and that's how we live our life, as opposed to sort of just being a pinball machine in the physical world. Much about that. How would you suggest someone starts their tantric journey? To me, it always begins in whatever you call prayer. It always begins in this quiet place where you meditate, however you understand that. And we sit quietly and we listen inside and we ask, what's my first step? And it really is that simple. That says, is it a book? Maybe it's my book. Maybe it's someone else's book. Maybe it's a course. Maybe it's something you've never even thought of. Maybe it's taking a class, and from that class you meet someone who knows something that you need to know. It's almost like all you need to know is the next step, but it's your next step. And then that develops this confidence in listening within. And then that just begins the journey. It could be literally right now, today, wherever you are, saying, what do I feel called to do next? And just doing it, right? No books, no nothing. Just what's my next step? I find when I teach Tantra, and I do teach Tantra, a lot of it's just giving words to things that we already know deep in our heart, and a way of understanding it within the world we live in. But it's really about just simply helping people blossom what's already in there. So, our time is done. Our hour is up. Thank you so much. So I'm going to be, now that I've discovered Insight Timer, I'm actually planning to be here almost every day. So I have a number more this week. I would love for you to join me there. And yeah, there's the donation button that is definitely a win-win for everybody if you want to share there. And thank you so much for joining me today. This has just been wonderful. And I look forward to seeing you again, maybe tomorrow, for a little meditation. We'll see you later.